I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
The idea of a woman losing her identity when she gets married, it just always seemed like awkward and wrong to me. And I didn't understand why a woman's lineage doesn't go along with her, like while mine gets to go on, forever and ever.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for listening. Today's episode is part 2 of an interview with Kamala and Marvin about race, gender, privilege, and about how those things impact their marriage. Today, we'll also learn about the reaction that Marvin and Kamala faced when they decided to hyphenate their last names. If you haven't listened to Tuesday's episode, you should definitely do that, as our conversation about privilege today will make a lot more sense if you do. So with that, let's go to our interview with Kamala and Marvin. You've got an oppressor and you've got an unintentional oppressor.
Oh, 100%.
Mm-hmm. And an unintentional oppressor specifically gets, I think, defensive.
Yep.
Because the unintentional oppressor says, I'm not a bad person.
Yep.
And then you're saying it's the oppressed. This is where the oppressed does have a responsibility.
Yeah.
When we don't like to say that. We don't like to say that the victim has responsibility. But in this case, you're saying the victim, quote unquote, does have a responsibility to be open to the dialogue.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there's another layer too, which is to say to the unintentionally impressed or insinuate, you're not a bad person.
Well,
this is what we talk
what
about
we talk about
a lot, because I think
and
that
there's like there's a fine line to be drawn there, because it's like anyway, I think you should talk first, because I think it'll make more sense if
I have a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
So I think that, so this is something that we talk about because, especially when I post things about race, like Marvin will say like, ooh, like your critique there was very harsh. Like, do you think that you're going to shut down the dialogue? And my response is always like, first of all, like some part of this is meant to make you uncomfortable, because all new information is uncomfortable. You need to kind of have your foundation of privilege rocked a little bit in order to be able to come to the table. Second, like if you're only at the table to not be offended, then like you may as well leave, because this conversation can't proceed. Like we all have to be like hit in a place that like hurts us a little bit. But we also have to understand that I think in all of these things, like especially marriage, but if we take it out to the like cultural issues, like your behavior in a specific moment is not meant, and me calling out that behavior or that statement is not a referendum on if you're a good person or not. That it should never be the issue that we're talking about. We're talking about that specific action and that specific instance. And I think that like where Marvin and I sometimes like, I will say he's too soft and he will say I'm too tough, is that I'm very willing to say that action was racist. Here's why. And he feels like, oh, you said that. Now they're going to be like really like they don't want to come to the table anymore. And it's like you have to have an honest conversation with people about what's actually happening. And then let's talk about how you can correct for that. Let's talk about how you can be a great ally if really like if it was truly unintentional, you want to not only not be racist, you want to be actively anti-racist. So let's talk about like how you can do that.
Well, and you're right, because the thing about illusions is you don't know you have them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right, until they're pointed out. And the thing about privilege is that the definition of privilege is that you don't have to think about privilege.
No, it's invisible.
Yeah, it's an invisible benefit. That's
and we all
endured.
have some form of it too. I
All of us have
think
some
that's the
privilege.
other thing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm very willing to like call things out, but I'm also like
Harvard Business School.
Yeah, I need things called out too. There are things that I don't see. There are issues that I don't face. And for me, it's kind of like that's why it's even more important for me to be in the conversation, because I might actually be a voice that might be listened to because of unfair privilege that I have. And I might also be the one who like I still have the wherewithal to talk about it because I'm not being beaten down in the same way as I think sometimes when we talk about the responsibilities of the oppressed, when you're going through it every day, your spirit is so beaten down.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why we need other allies who are not in that fight every day, who may have a little bit more like they still got some energy, like they still like they haven't been kicked every day. And we need those people to get into the conversation because you want, like in this case, you want people of color to not only fight racism but solve racism, like and explain it, and always with a smile, like not
Yeah.
possible.
Right. Yeah.
I
not
can't do
possible.
that for you. But in a marriage context, I think that like the parallel there is like, of course, in our relationship, like I'm never thinking or coming from a place of like my husband is a bad person. Here's why. And so I'm always trying to make it about like this particular thing made me feel this way. And I think the subtext, maybe it needs to be said more is like, and I understand that this is not how you feel about me. So let's talk about
Well,
the disconnect.
so taking those two contexts into one, sometimes when you're the oppressed party in whatever context, you're just too tired
Yeah.
to have the conversation. You know, in the racial context, you're dealing with actual oppression all day, every day, subtly and not so subtly in different
Right.
forms, and so you just don't want to explain it. And in the marital context, how does that fatigue play in the marital context, and what's your responsibility in that moment? Is that a clear
Yeah.
question?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I asked it well.
Yeah, I get the question. I have to think about it. As I'm listening to Kamala, I think about like when we talk about the responsibility of the oppressed versus the oppressor, and I look at someone like, Kamala, and versus myself, she just went on this whole like speech, like off the cuff, like off her head, and is able to articulate these things like point by point.
Yeah, she nailed
And
it.
she can and she can do that at any point in time, while me, like I struggle to concoct my thoughts into words, and I imagine that more people are closer to my end of the spectrum
I think so. Yeah.
than her end of the spectrum. So what I see, especially with social media and also in our marriage or whatever, is that somebody will say something, and it might be a little offhanded. It might be a little. It might not realize. It might not be totally thoughtful to context, and this onslaught will just come to him of, oh, you're racist, oh, you did this or whatever, this whole onslaught. And so and I don't like that. I like, because it's like, hold on, give this person a chance, or open up the conversation before you jump to this judgment, before you jump to this attack. And I feel like in our marriage, like we have those same kind of situations where it's like, you know what, I said something and I didn't realize how you understood it, but and I wish sometimes that instead of like saying, you just said something and that means this, and why did you say it, or whatever, it would be like, hold on, like, what do you mean by that? Just explore a little bit more before jumping to this conclusion, jumping to this judgment. And that's what I mean by the responsibility of the oppressed, is just to be a little bit more of the oppressed, to just be a little bit more open to hearing out. But on my side also is like, okay, being able to talk. I don't know.
I mean, I think like one thing I want to clarify or just talk about, like, since we're now talking about like oppressed and oppressor, like
Yeah.
in this, like very clearly, like I am not the oppressed in my marriage, and
Yeah.
like my husband is not the oppressor.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
just want to
but
like
I-
clarify that, and like, but I think in terms of like which
Yeah.
of us has the quote unquote upper hand. In a different scenario, like it really varies. Like there are times when I feel like where something he has done has like personally offended me, and like, so maybe it's the like offended and the offender.
Yeah.
Like we switch
yeah.
places a lot.
Yeah.
And he doesn't always, like, he's not always the one offending me. Sometimes, like, I offend him.
By the way, I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if any listeners write in about that. But I think it's pretty clear that in the marital context, this concept of oppressor and oppressor switches back and forth depending on the conversation.
Right, because it's not just a male-female thing or anything like that.
And clearly with you two, that's the case because you kind of swap back and forth.
But I think to your point about, like, how do you how does the person who's offended, if they feel like they've been offended, like, again and again on the same thing, how do they actually talk about it?
Yeah.
I think that it's something that we've had to work on and are still working on, because even though I'm very outspoken, there are definitely some areas where, like, I'll try to bottle things up, and I will try to because in my own head, I'm like, you know what? He probably didn't mean that. I just took it the wrong way. I can, like, work it out in my own head. I don't need to talk to him about it. But
kind of like the guacamole conversation. You might not actually go.
I didn't say any of the things that I just
You're
said.
just thinking about it, yeah.
But in the process of thinking about it, I am getting withdrawn. I'm very quiet. I'm pulling away.
Yeah.
And he might have to be like, hey, what's wrong? What's wrong? Like 10 times before I finally say, okay, I was trying to, like, just let it go, let it roll off my back, but I'm really upset about X, Y, and Z. And I think that, like, Marvin, in some ways, like, he also can be a bottler, but he's maybe more convincing. Like, it's very clear
that he's okay.
Yeah, I'm like, if I'm not okay, it's very clear. He may not say something for a while, and then we'll have a conversation. I'm like, whoa, you've been thinking about this for months?
So do you think it's your responsibility in that scenario, if you're thinking about something over and over, maybe, I don't know, some quantified number of times, 3 times, it's your responsibility to go talk about it in a particular way?
If you're the one who something has been bothering, for you to speak up for yourself. I do think so. I mean, we had this situation, some version of this conversation came up maybe a couple of months ago around, like, where we want to live long term. And we talked, like, in passing, I think very intentionally about, like, I'm from New York. I want to go back to New York, like, eventually. And Marvin has been, like, very okay with it from what I saw. And then, like, at some point we had some conversation where someone made some offhanded comment, like, I laughed about it, and, like, and he got very quiet, and I was like, what happened there? And he was like, oh, I'm not feeling so, like, okay about the New York thing anymore. And, like, that was an example of, like, I guess, conversations or thoughts he had been having for a while that just manifested in that moment. And I definitely felt very blindsided. It was like, because how was I supposed to know that you were ruminating or, like, brooding on something like that? So you do in your marriage sometimes have to, even though you're like, I'm the offended, you still need to be the one to open up the conversation, because the other person has no idea.
And then it's their responsibility to listen.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Oppressor oppressee is a loaded phrasing, and that we should be really careful about.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it does bring some clarity to this dynamic that happens individually and culturally. Yeah, both parties have an obligation to have dialogue. Okay, this has been really, really great, useful for me. Thank you a lot.
Yeah.
And we've really gone over time, but there's one thread that I wanted to go back to, if you guys...
Yeah.
Okay. The thread I wanted to go back to was body image. Now, I completely get your point. But what your perspective that you've been articulating on the issue of body image is thoroughly and utterly legit, and it's probably the point that we don't speak to often enough in culture. So it's the one that needs to be given some voice right now. Okay. On the other hand, what if your husband does want you to have a particular kind of body? What do you do? That is so tough, right? I mean, on one hand, he doesn't have a right to want you to have a particular kind of body. On the other hand, he's your lover, and he's attracted to what he's attracted to. I don't even know how to ask the question responsibly, to be perfectly honest. but there's something in there that I think needs to be unpacked a little bit.
I don't know if I can solve this one. It's hard. 'Cause I think that like the way that I try to think about it and something that kind of resonates with me is this idea that looks fade, beauty fades, all of these things are temporary. So I fell in love with the person that, Marvin is on the inside. And so sometimes, if you feel like body image is something that's on the table, it makes you sort of question like, well, what did you fall in love with? What is the thing that brought you here? At the same time, I do think that you want to make sure that you and your partner stay connected on a physical level.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think it's kind of like you can want what you want, and if you can find some kind of mutual language in which to express and discuss that, great. But I think where the trouble comes up is that if it feels like their desire for that visual thing is trumping like what's fundamental in the marriage, it's like if that's starting to supersede like their respect for you, their love for you, their connection to you, if it feels like something visual could actually affect one of those three things, that's where I start to feel a little like, I don't know. Does that make sense? Like I don't know what the solution is.
It's almost kind of like emotional connection, intellectual connection, mutual respect trumps body. But then that makes me wonder if that's the case, and correct me if I put words in your mouth though, but if that's the case, then what if he wants you to have a particular way, of expressing yourself emotionally, and that feels oppressive to you?
I don't know. I mean, what do you think? I kind of feel like, one, there's a good chance that this is very specific to different couples in terms of like their comfort around talking about these issues. And so, like, I have a friend who...
And it's abstract because you guys are both attractive. So it's not like, I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like either one of you is verging on the possibility of being morbidly obese.
That like no one would want to touch you or anything like that.
And which is, also, by the way, not to say that morbidly obese people aren't attractive. That's
and
a
that
whole
someone shouldn't want to touch them.
Right.
Exactly.
So, and also you're both articulate and lovely. And so there's not like... there's not some issue that the other one is desperately trying to change, but we do that with our partner. We want them to adjust, and
we
then
want
that
them to change different things about them. Why is body so different? I mean, I don't know. I was going to say that I think like one thing that resonated with me was a friend of mine talked about like her parents' marriage. And she said that like there were definitely moments when like her dad might make jokes about maybe what her mom wore or like why don't you update your wardrobe or all of these other things. But she was like her mom was never insecure about it because at the end of the day, like it was very clear that he was attracted to his wife. They had a very like active and healthy sex life. He was super affectionate. So she knew that none of those comments actually penetrated to the core of like their physical and emotional connection. That was the dressing. That was the icing, if you will. That wasn't the cake. And I think that really resonated with me because I think if I feel like if I'm in a situation where your connection to me is very visibly tied to some specific visual marker, then of course I'm going to feel very insecure. If I feel rock solid in our connection otherwise, then I think you have more license, if you will, to talk about the drapes or whatever the like icing might be because I know the cake is secure. Like maybe you want a different color icing. Like we can talk about that. So I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about it. I don't know if that would resonate with anyone, but I think sometimes like it may be more because you feel like it's actually affecting the like foundation of your connection, and that in some ways like cheapens how you think about your connection to the person.
No, I think there's just some areas where you just have to recognize that people have sensitivities in certain areas. Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Like I've had previous relationships where like the person could come up to me and just be like, I'm not doing nothing with that belly of yours, and I'll be like, oh, okay, it's time for me to start running, and then you just move on but that's not an area that I'm sensitive in. But if the response is different elsewhere, then it's like, oh, okay, this realm is different for that person, and you just have to respect that realm, and then you have to decide on your end, okay, is this something, since I'm not, since if I want, Naomi Campbell, her to become Naomi Campbell or something, I'm not going to get it. Is that something? Is that something that will make me want to go away from the whole relationship? And it's another area where it's like, choose what your fight is.
I think kind of one thing that you said that I think is definitely true is like you have to understand what your partner's like buttons might be, because it's very different for different people. Like there are some people who are we all have some areas in which we feel very secure and nothing anyone says can like shake our confidence.
Right.
And we have other areas in which we are very insecure, and like something that someone close to you says could definitely shake your confidence. I find that like when it comes to, for me, it might be more around like body image, because I was never like the girl that had a ton of boyfriends or any of those things. And like I think whoever you are in middle school, especially as a girl, you sometimes take that with you.
Yes,
and so
so
you're
true.
like, is this a referendum on if I'm attractive or not?
Yeah.
Like, so everything is like, it's like you're either I am attractive or I'm not attractive. So how do I read that comment?
Yeah.
Whereas when it comes to like how I did in school or something like that, I'm very secure in like, being intelligent, being articulate, being able to like to be successful. So like
So somebody could call you stupid and you'd be like, whatever.
I'd be like, you're stupid.
Yeah.
And move on.
That's a dumb insult. Move on.
Right. And so I think like,
And
for him, like
I'm the exact opposite.
exactly, like he has a totally
right,
different
right.
space where like for him, he is very insecure, unnecessarily in my opinion, around like if he's communicating well or if his point is getting made. So like I would never make any jokes about like intellect or communication or success or anything, because I'm like, that would really hit him very personally.
Yeah.
Whereas like for me, I'd be like, whatever, I'm definitely going to be successful. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But it really depends. So I
Just
think
be
you have
sensitive
to,
to sensitivities.
yeah, you know what those issues are and you respect them accordingly. I feel like we didn't talk about one of our best stories though.
Does it have anything to do with boundaries?
No, I was going to talk about like, well, maybe around like our last name.
Oh,
Which is
yeah,
something
that's
that's come
right.
up a ton with our family
my
and friends.
That's right. Now, you told me about it, and then you made a comment at the very beginning of
Because
the
he
episode.
introduced himself incorrectly.
Did you guys hyphenate?
We
We hyphenated our name.
And you both took the newly hyphenated name.
Correct them though.
and both changed our names. And so I actually haven't heard this story from your perspective, so I'm curious to hear how he would tell it. But my recollection is that when we were engaged, I don't even know how this came up, but we were talking about last names. And I was saying like,
Well, wait, let him tell it.
oh,
Because if you've never heard
Then
him
I
tell
will
it,
color it.
Yeah,
Do it.
don't taint it.
No, to me, I think ever since I was in college and I had like a Black Studies class, and that Black Studies class happened to center, because we'd be in a circle and it was mostly women in that circle. I was going to say females. It was mostly
female whats? Female orangutans, lizards,
it was mostly Black females in the circle,
women.
and I like to mess with it. And and so we talk about these issues of, women, feminism and things like that. And a lot of things during that class just resonated with me. And I grew up, like I mentioned, with 9 aunts. Well, not 9 aunts. Like, basically, I had 9 women in my house at the same time. My sister, 4 aunts, my mother, aunties and things like that. And so the idea of a woman losing her identity when she gets married, it just always seemed like awkward and wrong to me. And I didn't understand why your lineage like why a woman's lineage doesn't go along with her, like while mine gets to go on, forever and ever. And so when we got married, when we were getting married, when we were getting closer to our wedding, that's what I was thinking about, because we were talking about last names, whether she should keep hers or whether she should adopt mine and things like that. And I was like, and I just started thinking about it in terms of our kids. Like, so when my kid is born, she'll be, whomever Avila or or she would be Salmon, but her kid would be Avila, and like, where is that connection? Where is that line? And I was like, you know what? Let's just have both of our names so that when his dad, when her dad sees the kid, like, that's my granddaughter with, my same name. Same thing with my dad. So I was thinking more along that line. Like, I just wanted that lineage to remain intact. And then, gives the kids a great, conundrum to deal with. But, let them deal with it. Let them do whatever they want.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make that statement. And I think I really did want to make a statement that, the woman's lineage is important as well. So.
And I think part of it, like, just even the way that you told the story, I think it goes back to, like, Marvin is a very logical person. So something that, like, there's probably a more emotional way that story could be told, or a more emotional narrative behind it. Mm-hmm. And for him, it was just very, well, you are a person. You have a family. Why should your family disappear? Let's hyphenate those families. And so for me, of course, like, I connected with it from a very emotional place where I was, like, really blown away by, it's one thing, like, some guys are cool with their wives, like, hyphenating their names, but the idea that the man would also change his name was so beyond anything that I would even have, like, thought was possible. And it really made me, like, see him again, like, just in a totally different light. Mm-hmm. Like, it was something I didn't even think was possible, was so easy for him. But it was not easy for a lot of other people in our lives initially.
That was fun.
Because he enjoys the sport of debate. And was completely detached from some of the emotion behind it, where I was like, this is so offensive.
Yeah, and I was just like, you're so foolish. like when people would, I got it so much. I got it from coworkers, from my friends.
Yeah.
People are uncomfortable when you don't meet their gender role expectations.
It's like, I'm like, wait, whose tradition is this?
Yeah.
Like, who made this decision, and why are you okay with that decision?
Just because you're okay with it and, didn't, like, think critically about it doesn't mean that I have to go along blindly as well. And I think that probably there were kind of two things that happened. One, like, we didn't talk to our families about it because shockingly we felt it was a personal decision.
You're right, yeah.
So at the wedding, when they announced, like, Mr. and Mrs. Avila Salmon, like, I think both of our parents were like, huh? And then
you maybe should have told them.
We really thought it was relevant to nobody. But and in my mind, I was like, my parents are going to be psyched.
I actually told my parents.
I didn't tell my parents.
And I told your brother the night before.
So I thought this was like, oh my God, look at what this man I'm marrying is doing, like, for our family. Look how much he cares about, like, our, like, heritage. And so I thought it would be a non-issue. So I was a Salmon and he was an Avila. So I was like, I thought it would be a non-issue for the Salmons. The Salmons, like, initially had the most issue with it. So my dad, after the fact, like, or I should back up. So day of the wedding, I'm, like, getting ready, putting on my makeup and all this stuff. And my younger brother comes over to the bridal suite and he's like, Kamala, I got to talk to you. And I was like, what? Like, what do you got to talk to me about urgently on my wedding day? And he pulls me aside and he's like, oh, like, Marvin mentioned that he's also changing his name. Like, are you guys sure about that? Like, does he want to do that? And I was like, are you
I can't
bleeping kidding me? On my wedding day, you're trying to introduce. I was just like, you should be grateful he wants to keep your family name. And I was so annoyed.
I can't believe he brought it up with you.
Yeah.
I mean, he should know you better, right?
Oh my!
Well, I think the assumption for many was that it was her idea, and I went along with it.
I was gonna say, I think that was because
they were
my
feeling
parents
emasculated on your behalf.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's ironic too.
Yes, and because I think my dad felt that
for him
as well.
to be able to do that.
Because
because my dad's reaction was like that as well, and like he kind of blew up about it and was like started like with a bunch of arguments that didn't make sense, but were like the surface arguments were like that's completely nonsensical, like that's going to be confusing. Why would you? But what it got down to was like, why did you make Marvin do this?
Yeah, the core argument was you're threatening the sanctity of your relationship by emasculating your husband at the wedding.
They assumed that I like pushed it on him.
Yeah, and when in fact it was his.
Quite the opposite. Yeah. And I think partly because like I'm a very opinionated person, and so I think they, in their minds, they assume that like I tell him what to do or I push him around, which like nothing could be further from the truth. But and I think there just was this like the societal aspect of like you must be doing it to him because no man would agree to that, and it's like, whoa, no, that's not what happened.
Wow. You know, marriage and community are intertwined inextricably in my view.
Yeah.
You know, the marriage doesn't exist without community.
100%.
And community is there to strengthen a marriage, and marriage strengthens community. That works both ways, but they break each other too. Mm-hmm. You know, as a divorce lawyer, I saw that over and over. If one person started telling their friends how annoyed they were with their partner, then their friends start to believe it, and then their friends create this echo chamber. And then it becomes a bigger thing than it was. And then the friends are suddenly trying to convince that person to get a divorce because, right? On the other hand, if you talk about your relationship in a positive way, it creates that positive echo chamber. And community can unwittingly get involved and start breaking down the sanctity of a relationship. Yep. But the interesting thing about this was, it sounds to me like they were doing it because they were worried that you guys had harmed your relationship, and they were trying to fix it in this kind of roundabout way based in their insecurities.
I think it was, I don't know if I saw that. Like, I don't know if I saw concern for our relationship. I more so saw concern for the ritual, for the tradition, for the way things are. I didn't necessarily see concern for our relationship.
I think it was like this.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't there, but that sounds like that's the surface thing.
I actually think the reverse. I feel like the surface thing was the like, we're going to couch it in like making sure that you weren't like too pushy with your husband. But the thing, like the real root of the issue was like, how does your action in some way critique what you think of the tradition and possibly of what we've done?
Oh, right.
And so I think that was the real issue because like my mom's dad, I mean, my mom's brother, like also like got into heated conversation with us and we're like, they're going to call your husband Mr. Salmon. And I was just like, well, no.
Actually, that never happens.
Yeah. If anything, like my name, you know, my previous last name like gets dropped more. My maiden name gets dropped because it's Avila Salmon. And so when people are, if there's not enough space, like I'm much more likely to be called Mrs. Avila than he is to be called Mr. Salmon. But all of that was kind of getting to like their own beliefs of like how a man would feel like because of how they would feel, which is not how he felt.
Yeah, and the order was interesting too because we had that moment at DMV and other moments too where they're like, okay, even if you guys did hyphenate your name,
you did it wrong.
You did it wrong. It should be the male last. And for us, it was like really the only reason was just phonetics. Like Salmon Avila sounds like salmonella. So
that was literally like how he made the decision.
I didn't even know there was a rule about which order.
Oh yeah, we were like when we went to the DMV, like to your point of community.
They were just trying to get so involved in you.
Yeah. A woman we had never met, like filling out the paperwork as we're both like changing. So there were a lot of people who were like, "Oh, you're both changing your names. Oh, you're both." Yes, that's why we're here.
Man, there's a lot of irony in this.
And then they were like, "Well, just so you know, you're doing it wrong." I was like, "I'm pretty sure that we can do our name any way we want to. That's like the whole point of us being here." But the kind of happy ending to the story was after mostly my dad had like a very strong reaction to it and it's not the right thing to do. After like a few conversations in a few days, like he left, I think it was an email maybe. It was an email where he just like came like full circle 180 degrees where he was just like, I can't believe that like I had that reaction. Like, first of all, I'm so like appreciative of the fact that my son-in-law like wants to keep our family name as part of like your journey going forward. Second of all, like what's in a last name anyway? Like my last name was like probably like hundreds of years ago, like the last name of the family that owned us as slaves. So like why is that the thing that I'm most concerned about? And like I'm so proud that I have a son-in-law who would do this, and that I have a daughter who would stand up for us, and all of these other things.
What
and
a
like
lovely
it was
360, 180, whatever.
amazing. But it just was like this was something that had never been thought about. But through that conversation, all of a sudden I think everyone like took another look at the tradition.
This is your role in life.
I'm a disruptor. But I'm a uniter. I'm a disruptive
ultimately,
uniter.
so that people learn something about themselves, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, and everyone was like offended, and like the conversations in that immediate aftermath were not all pleasant. But we got to a great place.
We had another couple on the show that changed both of their names also, but they did it in a different way. Each of them took the other's last name as their middle name. And so it was. It ended up becoming Emily LaFave Olson and Rob Olson LaFave.
Love it.
Interesting.
And what they found was that their family was a little surprised at first, but then ended up loving it on Facebook, of all places. Because on Facebook, it suddenly felt like Rob was now part of the Olsons.
Yeah.
And it suddenly felt like Emily was part of the LaFaves.
Yeah.
And they both, because, you know, when on Facebook, it's really, family is definitely oriented by name.
Yep.
And so they felt like they had each gained somebody as opposed to one losing somebody. And I think they were a little surprised at first, but then ended up loving it. But it was also, the hyphen wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that made it, and I'm not saying it's right, obviously, but I'm wondering if that made it more palatable to the family, so it was less disruptive. What do you think?
It's a good question. I mean, we never talked about the middle name option, though I have some friends who've done that as well.
It doesn't solve the problem for the kids, though.
Yeah,
No.
that was my thing about it.
And that was your whole reason for it.
Yeah.
Right, because then like you and your kid would have a different last name.
And they're still trying to figure that out. They don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think more than anything, it's like this whole experience, one, has made it's so eye-opening to see like how difficult the state actually makes it for you to change your name.
Yeah.
We've actually probably, in all honesty, only completed 50% of the process, which is that we've changed our name with the DMV and the passport services, and you would think that that would trump everything.
Right.
But it turns out that the Social Security card is actually what matters. And because they're open at random times when we're both at work, like we just haven't done that step.
Yeah.
So when we file our taxes, it's still like Salmon and Avila, but we can travel the world as the Avila Salmons. But you find like all these different ways in which like society isn't quite ready for this phase that we're in now. Like spaces where you're typing in names where they don't allow hyphens, spaces that don't have enough space for both names. Like, but I think it's just part of the growing pains, like, because this had never been a prevalent issue. And from what I've read, like, hyphenated names are on the rise.
It is on the rise.
But still, what Marvin has done, I think, is still quite unique.
And,
Totally.
And with the middle name versus, like, how disruptive it is, like, a middle name, you can escape it. Like, because nobody ever calls me Marvin Arthur Avila, and I'll punch them if they do. But no.
So you're like, no one would know about the stand that you were taking if you just took mine.
No one would know about it. So like, it was definitely more disruptive to like put it right in the last name, because it's a lot harder to gloss over. Escape or anything.
And we had very different experiences of like how our friends, and like leaving family aside, like how our friends and coworkers reacted.
Oh, mine's were.
Because he had a totally different response. Because as a guy, they were like, "How could you do this?"
Everybody feels
to
like
the cause.
It's amazing to me. This is the period I would put on that whole sentence: is that it takes immense strength for a man in our culture to be willing to change his name, and the irony of that fact is that the reason people get so upset is because it makes them feel weak.
Yeah.
So kudos to you, Marvin. Kudos to both of you, but Marvin, really, I mean, that really took something.
Thanks, honey.
Well, thanks for being on the show, guys. We could
Thank
go for
you.
another hour because we have so many loose threads in this conversation that I want to pick up. But
We'll do a sequel sometime.
we'll do a sequel. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us.
Such a pleasure.
This was awesome.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Now, I like to end shows with a very short game of this or that.
Excellent.
So let's stick with some of the classics. If you had to either be dropped in a volcano or eaten by sharks, which would it be, Marvin?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I would go dropped in a volcano because there's a drop and you can see the stuff before you fall.
I was going to
and-
say, because he actually wants to go to a volcano. So he's like, upside.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah, because I get to trip up to the volcano. I get to see inside. I get to see what lava looks like. I'm like, oh, this is what the inside of the volcano looks like. And when I drop in the volcano, I'll be dead immediately. So
That's the best answer I've had to that question, hands down.
And I knew it immediately.
Well, what's your answer?
Oh my gosh. Probably the volcano, because I have a fear of like being bitten and eaten by things in general. Like
Yeah.
animals kind of terrify me. So I think that at least like the level of fear I felt would be greater in the shark scenario. And again, I would die on impact.
Yeah,
So.
it's quicker death. Yeah, okay. All right. Batman or Superman?
Superman.
Batman.
Now, that was so quick.
Because I knew he was going to say the wrong answer, but I already knew what his answer was. We've talked about this. I actually think that this is one where I do think there is a gender divide. I think that more women tend to prefer Superman. Here's why. One, because Superman has actual superpowers, and we're more... So that's the obvious right answer. But also because Superman will always be there for you right away. He can get to you instantly. He can fly to you. Batman's got to like get in his car. He's got to deal with traffic. He doesn't actually have any superpowers. So if you feared
Deal with
someone,
traffic.
if you
But
feared
wait,
someone,
but-
he couldn't kill them.
But
Like
didn't you
Superman, you're just
just-
protected.
Didn't you just make yourself dependent upon a paternalistic force?
I will, yes, but I have a choice of two paternalistic forces.
Okay.
Strength or money. And I will always choose strength over money, even though I would like money. But I want my own money. I don't mind if my man is strong.
Yeah, because I didn't throw Wonder Woman in the mix because that would have been
That's
too
true.
obvious. All right, Marvin.
I like Batman because Superman can't exist. like
Logical side.
like and his existence is boring. It's like, okay, of course he's gonna win because he can fly and he can carry a planet. Like there's no adventure.
What's better than winning?
There's no adventure. There's no suspense. There's no nothing. Like who has kryptonite? Like so Superman bores me to death, and Batman is far more fascinating, far more interesting, and if I had enough money and if I had like some genius in me, I could totally be Batman.
It seems attainable.
It's more attainable.
Yeah, Batman has to deal with his humanity.
Yeah.
So you basically said assured success is tedious.
Well, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about this idea that you can't have a game without limits.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have a life without restrictions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He does have one, or he has one
Well,
thing.
kryptonite, but like you said, nobody, like, where are you going to get kryptonite? And also, he always gets away from it. Well, then so does Batman. I mean, Batman
Yeah.
always wins
Yeah,
too.
Batman,
But
It,
right.
it's harder for him.
all right, second to last question. $1 billion or enlightenment? I think
Wait,
I asked.
the $1 billion or what?
Enlightenment.
Oh, I choose enlightenment.
Enlightenment under duress. So I would really like $1 billion. And
Is that it? That under the duress of whom?
I don't know. I mean, I think that like, gosh, I sound materialistic, which I'm
And the rest of being a good person.
yes. Well, because I think that like I could do a lot more good with enlightenment, both for myself and for others.
Yeah.
Which ultimately is what I care about. But I could have a lot of fun, and I could do a lot of good with $1 billion. I don't know. I think you should give me both.
I mean, I kind of think with those two, it might not matter. You know, because it's like really what you're saying is I want to be happy, right?
Yeah.
And you're just kind of wondering which one am I going to be happier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said enlightenment.
He said enlightenment.
Yeah, enlightenment. That's actually easy because
that's because you don't actually want $1 billion.
I definitely don't want $1 billion.
I do. I would just like to also be enlightened.
Cheers to that. All right, last question. If you had to either live for infinity or die in the next 5 minutes.
Infinity.
Oh gosh. Infinity or die in the next 5 minutes. You know what? I'm starting not to like music now.
I already know your answer.
Yeah, so I'd have to go for 5 minutes.
And you see how he's willing to make me a widow at any point.
I mean, if given the choice, like
I knew you were gonna say that because
Yeah.
like sometimes we'll like whether it's like listening to the radio or watching TV or just like seeing the things that are happening in the world, he'll always say like, I'm definitely going to be ready to go by 2060. Like I'm almost done now. Like, okay.
I'm almost done now.
I don't say that part, but I'm like
That was the implied. I filled in the dots in my head.
But I'm like, yeah, I don't, because the relevance of your experience, I don't know. I just think, unless everyone else is living to infinity as well.
That's a good point.
Like,
But I do have a very like intense fear of death, so I would definitely opt for infinity.
I wonder what's going to happen after the sun goes supernova and you're still hanging out in the middle
Yeah.
of dark space. And what you're going to
I'm
think
just gonna
about that
make new
choice.
friends every lifetime. I love people actually, so that's the other piece.
That's it for part one of our interview with Marvin and Kamala, folks. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard on our show today, please subscribe to us on iTunes. It makes a big difference when you do that. Please also consider donating to our Patreon campaign. We're on a mission to crush shame, and every penny really helps. You can find our campaign at patreon.com/together. That's patreon.com/together. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out via one of our platforms. You can find our website at www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both at together_show, or you can email me at host@together.guide. Our producer is Charlene Goto. Our web designer is Courtney Munna. Our art director and my one and only, who at this very moment is listening to me record this outro and choosing photos for this week's magazine articles, is Aubrey Pick. Thanks once again to my guests, Marvin and Kamala. Really appreciate it, guys. Love you both. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.